Welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard, and this is Lap of the World. After shipping our NSX across the Atlantic, in the last video we collected it from the port in Bremerhaven, Germany, and headed west towards our eventual destination near LeMans. We decided to make Reims in the Champagne region of France a stop on the way, not for the famous bubbly beverage, but for one of the most epic roadside attractions for any fan of motorsports history. We hope you'll join us then as we take a pit stop on our travels to explore the preserved remains of Circuit de Reims-Gueux. France, so far, has been a beautiful country to drive through, the lush Ardennes forest near the eastern border giving way to rolling farmland and quaint villages through Champagne. At the heart of this region lies the city of Reims, where we stopped for the evening. I'm sure the city itself is interesting, but that's not why we're here. If you head west from Reims along the N31 and then turn a bit south onto the D27, you'll drive for a mile or so through some picturesque farmland before you begin to wonder if you've slipped back in time. There, frozen as if in some temporal anomaly, sit what look to be only dormant pit stalls, grandstands, and a timing tower for a racing circuit. Sponsor logos still in relatively high contrast, garage structures appearing fully intact, and very little overgrowth to suggest anything other than a circuit awaiting the next round of whatever championship will roll through and fill the stands with people. Other than perhaps the absence of glazing in the tower and some possibly anachronistic sponsor logos, a motorsports muggle could easily be forgiven for assuming that this could be part of an active racing facility. It's only the lack of a pit wall and other modern safety accoutrements that start to tell the tale to the savvy of what was once, but is no longer, one of the premier street circuits in France. While motor racing had been a thing in the region since 1912, the action didn't shift to west of Reims until 1926. Part of what would today be called a 5.2-mile semi-permanent street circuit, the stretch of pits, garages, and stands on the D27 were largely completed by 1928, with some additions later like the housing block as it evolved from its original 4.8-mile layout and events grew in size. The circuit layout on closed public roads wasn't anything terribly complicated, and while it went through a few evolutions over the years, it generally always followed a rough triangle composed of long straights and flat-out bends, with a hairpin and one other slower speed right-hand turn thrown in for good measure. Doing the math with Lorenzo Bandini's Formula 1 lap record in a Ferrari 312, covering the 5.2 miles in just 2 minutes and 11 seconds gives us an average speed north of 140 miles per hour in 1966. That same year, Bandini only managed 124 miles an hour average around Watkins Glen, so a technical track Reims-Gueux was not. And those high speeds, along with the challenge of making an open street circuit safe for ever faster cars, likely contributed to the end of racing here in favor of purpose-built tracks. Circuit de Reims-Gueux, through most of its active history, hosted motorsports at the highest levels, with rounds of international sports car championships, 12-hour endurance races, and Formula 1 French Grand Prix held semi-annually in stretches. In general, other than a break in the 40s for hopefully obvious reasons, the track was in consistent use from its opening in 1926 all the way up until the last checkered flag in 1972. F1 held their last race here in 1966 with another sports car race in 67, and only motorcycles thereafter. When the last bike crossed the finish line in 1972, operating expenses in the absence of top-flight racing had pushed the track out of business, and the story goes that the current mayor had commanded immediate demolition of the track buildings. But crews had only torn down a few pit boxes by the time that mayor was voted out, replaced by a new mayor who was in favor of preserving the track, or at least wasn't interested in spending the money to demolish it at the time. Following its Election Day reprieve, the facilities at Reims-Gueux stood vacant for the next few decades, subject to time, nature, and mischief. Ideas were allegedly floated for a revival-type vintage race in the 1990s, but by 2002, roadwork had permanently mooted any thoughts of driving the original layout, and the specter of demolition once again cast a shadow on the derelict buildings. Fortunately for the preservation of racing history and people like us who enjoyed walking through this time capsule, a group organized in 2004 under the banner of the Friends of the Circuit Gueux, and with a groundswell of support and growing sponsor base, they began the slow process of restoring what's left of the stands and buildings off of the D27. Since then, the housing block and timing center have been brought back to life, and they may even be available to rent for private events, with work continuing elsewhere as time and finances allow. While we're on the topic, we have no affiliation with the group, but there is a link in this video description in case any of you want to become a member for as little as €30 and help continue to save and restore this piece of automotive and racing history. Honestly, having seen their efforts up close, the attention to detail and quality of the craftsmanship is impressive. Everything looks new, but it looks 1950s and 60s new, without too much to give away that the most recent work was done post-COVID versus post-war. As Liz and I walked down the pit lane, climbed the tower, and strolled around the grounds, I was reminded of how things can easily go the other direction with historic tracks, even those purpose-built. In the US, Riverside is now a shopping mall, Warbonnet is a trailer park, and others like Greenville Roadway or Augusta International are effectively being given back to nature with maybe a modicum of a memorial, but certainly no real preservation efforts. As work continues, I can't help but think this would make an amazing venue for a stop on a vintage rally or small revival festival. As it sits, and from probably a very American perspective, it definitely fell into the category of we can't believe this is free, and we can't believe that most of it's just open to walk around, climb up in the pit tower, go into the stands, etc. We could have easily spent hours just walking around and soaking it in while reading up on history and trivia. It's at this point that we should probably own up to accidentally doing a little bit of crème, as a caution to others who might follow in our tire tracks. We learned later that we'd missed taking note of some road signs that technically forbid stopping on the side of the street here. Our oblivious confidence was bolstered by the commercial truck, Porsche, and gaggle of motorcyclists there when we arrived, followed later by a couple more carloads of people, some also on their way to Le Mans Classic, who similarly stopped to look around and take pictures. Given there's plenty of space, it honestly seems a bit silly, but rules are rules. It is a decently busy road, and I'm sure there are some legally sanctioned ways to visit and appreciate the old circuit. With luck and support, there have been plans floated for a museum with proper parking adjacent to the old structures, which I think would be amazing and appropriate given the historical significance of the place. Bon chance les amis on those efforts. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about Reims-Gueux, I will shout out the channel Circuits of the Past, as they're subscribed to our channel, and they have several videos on the circuit, including some interviews with those doing the restoration work. On a somewhat different note, if you'd like to see what driving it might have been like back in the day, there appears to be a pretty decent quality track mod for Assetto Corsa, which you could combine with your vintage racer du jour for some virtual laps. For Liz and I, though, our time here was rich but fleeting, as we were still on the clock to rendezvous with the rest of the NSX party further west. So it was time to leave the pits, join the old circuit, and press on towards Le Mans. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.